right, great. So as mentioned, I'm chatting today about the Graph, which is a blue chip Web3 protocol. And the Graph is the backbone of Web3 and DeFi, NFTs, DAOs, many other things within the Web3 space. So Web 2 to Web 3. So what does this look like? What is Web 2? What is Web 3? Web 3, I consider anything within the decentralized web. And Web 2 is really the centralized web that we know and use today. So the internet wasn't created to monetize data or sell people ads, but that's what it does because that's what it's incentivized to do. And so with Web 3, we're flipping that on its head. We're empowering individuals. And the Graph is offering decentralized infrastructure that brings brilliant new minds into an environment. It allows individuals to be compensated commensurate to the value they bring. I think that's one thing that protocols do, because there's no kind of centralized company at the middle of that that's taking those profits. So DeFi and Web3, I think Web3 is the future. Web3 is inevitable, and it's going to change the course of how everyone interacts on the internet. And what is the Graph? So the Graph is a decentralized indexing and query protocol that's powering most of the applications in DeFi and the Web3 space today. And you can kind of think of the Graph like this open data layer that sits on top of blockchains. And right now, the Graph supports over 22 networks. So Ethereum, Avalanche, Celo, Phantom, layer 2s like Arbitrum, also sidechains like Polygon, formerly called Matic. So the Graph is there to kind of be this connective tissue and help with interoperability at that indexing and query layer. And so the Graph allows for developers to access blockchain data and serve that data to their users. So no matter the underlying technology, those different blockchains, the Graph is there to support and abstract that complexity away so that developers can focus on building really great and really beautiful applications, and so that blockchains can become the future of the internet. And so Bitcoin really revolutionizes money. I think Ethereum and the Graph revolutionized the internet, revolutionized finance. And the Graph has become a default part of the stack. So the Graph is the decentralized indexing and query layer that sits on top of blockchains that developers then build with to build really great, vibrant applications. And so the Graph is powering most of the applications in the blockchain space today. So Uniswap, Synthetics, LivePeer, DAOstack, Decentraland, Aave, Gnosis, many, many others, almost every application that we know and love. The Graph they're using subgraphs with the Graph, and subgraphs are open APIs. So their APIs are open, not closed, like a LinkedIn, for example. LinkedIn's API is closed. Even though that's our data, Facebook data is also closed. Their API is closed. Even though that's our data, they own that API, they own that data. And so with subgraphs, that data is opened up so that anyone can use those subgraphs to build their application. And so what this does is it leads to kind of like Lego building blocks, so that, the Uniswap subgraph is used by many different people, like CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko, and different wallets like the Rainbow wallet. So it really allows for other applications to benefit from that open data. And so I would say without the Graph, DeFi wouldn't have been possible. So most DeFi applications are using the Graph. They're pulling that data. And right now there's over 2 billion staked in the Graph network, and a majority of that TVL that's staked in DeFi is flowing through subgraphs. One deep dive is how Uniswap uses subgraphs. So Uniswap, for those of you that don't know, is a decentralized exchange. And Ian, one of their developers that focuses on subgraphs at Uniswap, wrote a really great blog post recently on how Uniswap pulls their data from the Graph, from subgraphs. And so you can see here that trade volume, the total liquidity, the number of transactions, all of that is blockchain data that Uniswap uses subgraphs to pull that data to then allow us as users of Uniswap to be able to see that data in real time. So the Graph is kind of on-chain real-time data, And some people will say it's kind of like the opposite of what Chainlink does. Chainlink is bringing real world data and bringing it to the blockchain. Well, the graph is bringing blockchain data to the rest of the world. And the graph actually partners with Chainlink so that all of Chainlink's Oracle data can be indexed and queried via the graph. This is just another example of Uniswap. Uniswap v3 is also pulling data from the graph. They have many different subgraphs. More examples are like synthetics. They use subgraphs for almost everything, including you can use it for governance and many different things. This chart here shows the graph's query volume on the graph's hosted service. And we've seen consistent growth month over month. In May, and this is actually new numbers, but in last month, the graph did 25 billion queries. And there are over 20,000 developers that use the graph, and those developers have created over 16,000 subgraphs, and subgraphs are a proxy for dApps or applications. Some applications can have more than one subgraph, as we saw with the example of Uniswap. So it's not a direct number, but it is a proxy. And then we've seen consistent growth, so between 20 to 70% month over month in each of those three areas. And then to date, the graph has actually processed over 130 billion queries. And just showing, the graph's been around for some time. The idea was conceived 3 years ago, and the graph's hosted service started 2 years ago. And so since starting, this is how many queries the hosted service has processed. And what's pretty remarkable is that 25 billion of those were in May. So it just shows how much growth we've seen. And I think that speaks to a lot of the growth within the Web3 or blockchain space as a whole. So this kind of goes into a deep dive on those queries. So you can have a ton of different types of queries across many different use cases. And so we see here that actually 90% of those queries are within DeFi. And this is a snapshot from Q1. So this could have shifted. Maybe we've seen more activity in DAOs and NFTs since, just because they've been two areas that people have been really excited about and growing. And then this shows you that 2.6% are NFTs, those queries, and then 1% of those queries are DAOs. And then this breaks it down by subvertical. So we can see that 79% came from AMMs. That's really where a lot of the queries are happening, but also 5% within stablecoins, 4% within the Ethereum network, 2.2% in arts and collectibles, so NFTs, and then a smaller amount in derivatives, insurance, lending, DAOs, wallets, and beyond. And then this shows it by DeFi vertical. So we see that within that DeFi section, that 88% of those were AMMs, and then stablecoins, insurance, derivatives, asset management, staking. So the graph is a protocol, and the graph has been building for decentralization since inception 3 years ago. The graph has a token, and that is the GRT token, and that's a utility work token to be used in the graph network. And there are many different ways to participate in the graph network and earn GRT for the work that you bring to the graph ecosystem. And I think with protocols, protocols are going to eat the world. I think this is only a fraction of what we've seen with protocols. I think we're going to flip the work model on its head. People will be able to work for ideas and protocols as opposed to just centralized companies. And I think we're already seeing that with how many people participate in so many different projects. For example, I can lend on Uniswap as a liquidity provider. I can participate as a delegator in the graph network and earn passive income. And I can do so many other things within the blockchain space that you can work for ideas and protocols instead of just working for a centralized company, which I think is really powerful. This is just an image that breaks down those token economics even further. So indexers, consumers are in the graph network, and these are the different roles. So as an indexer, delegator, and curator, you can earn GRT, and then the consumer is the one that are the ones that are spending GRT. So indexers, those are node operators. This is the most technical role. The node operators in the graph ecosystem it's not passive. So they're spending at least 5 hours a week maintaining their indexer node. And a lot of these indexers have a big team behind them. It's not like you just spin up a Raspberry Pi and let it run. It is quite involved. So anyone who enjoys DevOps makes a great indexer. And then the curators. So with a open, decentralized, permissionless network like the graph, anyone can create a subgraph. So I could create a DeFi Summit subgraph. The DeFi Summit organizers could create a DeFi Summit subgraph. How would the indexers know which subgraph they should stake on? That's where the curators come in. So the curators, I call them open data alpha finders, because they're the ones that have the skill sets of the traders and the investors in this ecosystem looking for cool and new subgraphs that are coming up. For example, if I know Uniswap's launching V4, I'm going to mint signal on a bonding curve as soon as that subgraph launches on the Graph network, so that I can earn for doing that. And right now in the Graph network, curators earn about 10% of the GRT. And then you have the delegators. This is the least technical role. The delegators are delegating GRT to the indexers that they trust to help secure the network and also help give those indexers a larger stake. And then each indexer sets their own model around how much they're going to share with the delegators. For example, some only take 30% of the fees, others take a much higher amount, like 90%. So as a delegator, the most important thing that you do is make sure you choose the indexer and understand the indexer's economics before delegating to them. And then another piece in the Graph network is delegators actually can't be slashed. So your delegated stake is not at risk. Indexers can be slashed. So that's an important thing to note. Just if you are an indexer on the Graph network, you need to ensure that you are behaving to avoid being slashed. And delegation right now on the Graph network, you can earn around 10% depending on which indexer you choose, and that's APY. And then on the other side of this, you have the consumers. So the consumers at the current state are the dApp developers have actually chosen or are likely choosing to take on the query fees on behalf of their users to reduce friction. And so consumers pay GRT for queries. And so a lot of these dApp developers are likely going to pay for queries on behalf of their users. But how this could look in the future is very similar to how gas costs work in Ethereum. And so there's, I guess, product launches and different items that are coming up around this, so stay tuned. And then Web3, I think Web3 is going to be massive. It's going to be larger than the internet we see today. I think there's already an exodus from Web2 into Web3. At Edge and Node, we recently hired someone who was managing a 100-person engineering team at Google, another person who was managing a 100-person team at Airbnb. Nader recently joined us from AWS. So a lot of really, really talented people are leaving their centralized Web2 company jobs and joining the Web3 movement. And that's just within Edge and Node. Imagine what that looks like in people that are leaving to start their own protocols in Web3. So I think the future is really bright, and I think that Web3 is at this point inevitable. This is just a snapshot of the Graph ecosystem. So right now there's over 2.8 billion GRT staked. There's only 10 billion total GRT. So this is quite a high number, so 28% currently staked. In the Graph network, you can see more of this at thegraph.com if you're interested. And you can also see the different indexers and which subgraphs they are indexing. So what's next for the Graph? There's an upcoming launch around the subgraphs that are going live on the Graph network. So stay tuned for that. Their query fees will be flowing in the Graph network very soon. And then there will be an upcoming product launch that will really bring the Graph to its very full state. So I'm really looking forward to that. Curation will be launching soon with that product launch. So how can you help us build the future? There's many different ways you can get involved. If you like DevOps, I recommend indexing, delegating if you're not technical and want to help secure the network and earn passive income, curation, which is coming soon. If you have your finger on the pulse of different projects that are launching, you would make a great curator. The Graph Foundation also provides quarterly grants. So the last round that they did, they actually allocated $5 million worth of GRT to different projects building in the ecosystem. And one thing that we really try to do is we are creating a new financial system, we're creating a new internet, and we need all voices around the table. So you can earn a grant if you're not technical, if you just want to focus on building community or marketing, you can apply for a grant with the KPIs. And also if you are technical and interested in building subgraphs, that is eligible for a grant with the Graph Foundation. We're also hiring. So if you're interested in being hired at Edge and Node, you can find our jobs page at edgeandnode.com. And then, of course, joining the social media, the Twitter is Graph Protocol, and the Telegram is also Graph Protocol. You can basically find the Graph using the Graph Protocol handle on any social media platform. So thank you so much. I'm not sure if we have time for Q&A, but happy to answer any questions if there were any.
Hey, Tegan. Yeah, thanks again for giving us kind of like a full overview of the graph too. Yeah, we got a few minutes as well too in terms of Q&A questions too. If anybody from the DeFi Summit has some questions, we can definitely relay it over. Yeah, let's see.
So there was one question on when will the graph be leaving centralized AWS? So the question is around the hosted service. So the hosted service doesn't rely on AWS, but it does rely on a few different ETH nodes within the ecosystem. And that is, so decentralization takes time. And so we've been doing progressive decentralization over the past 3 years. And so as those subgraphs migrate over from the hosted service to the decentralized network, we'll see more and more of that. And then over time, the hosted service will actually be deprecated. So you'll see those subgraphs migrate over very, very soon.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that too. And I think that's like an important point too that people forget to realize. It's like, there is that progression of decentralization. And you look at many projects out there still too, like it's still a gradual thing, and jumping to full decentralization too without making sure that things are stable and fully, ready to work or be hosted as well too is still early for everything that we're doing. So I definitely seen that from other projects and also past projects as well too. So thanks for sharing that as well.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. If anyone's interested or has any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm the Kline Venture on Twitter, and my DMs are open.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Tegan. And yeah, we'll make sure that we shared all the socials for both the graph as well as Tegan as well. And thanks again for participating with the DeFi Summit.
Thank you so much. See you soon, Justin.
All right. Thank you.